Yo, what's up everybody? Today we're gonna get this thing in one piece, as well as get the female joint made and welded on there. So first thing, I need a handle on my can section here. Since my pattern on the bottom is pretty much done, I'm just gonna weld on a solid, that is a piece of tubing, but it's closed up at the end. So I'm just welding on a solid rod. Not my favorite way to do it, but I don't wanna pop a hole in my pattern and either, put a termination right in the middle of it, or you could add another section at the end, but I'm just gonna throw a solid handle on there. And then I'm just gonna put a good amount of heat into the beaker and then reshape the top a little bit, just to kind of how I need it. And then I'll pop my hole right here, as you can see, pop, and just tear that. And now, as long as you have a nice sharp set of shears, that is probably the most important part, clean and sharp, and only cut when the glass is hot. If you're grinding into some cold glass, you're not just messing up that sharpness of your shears, but you're just making some stuff that might bubble up and not look as good. So if your shears are nice and sharp, keep them sharp. Find the old man in your town that sharpens them and get them sharpened, and you will be able to shear pretty damn nicely to where you won't really need to swipe anything off. You can just go right into your weld. So there, I'm just using my Bunsen, giving it a little bit of extra love. Having a Bunsen on your bench is sweet. I can't believe it took us this long to make that a habit, but I really enjoy having one. The more I have it on there, the more I find myself using it for all sorts of different stuff. I'm pretty impatient when it comes to kiln time, so there I am. I didn't want to wait the 5 minutes for it to heat up. Just pull it out, stick it in the Bunsen, get it hot. Oh, here I'm using my roller just to make sure everything is nice and straight. There we go, looking good enough. Here I'm just shaping out my hole, getting everything prepped up to be the right size for the weld here. Just getting both pieces nice and hot, and want to put some heat into both lips. It's really easy to forget to line things up at this part if if you're trying to match up the sides of your disc or your donut with a certain, with the terminations on your pattern. Try to remember to do that, and then tag, and ultimate be the lathe moments. Just try to be nice and straight and work that weld. With this particular piece, since I'm welding a donut, which is a disc shape, onto a more round shape, the beaker shape, it doesn't act like you're welding two round things together. It's going to act different. So because of that, to get it optically how I want it, and to give it maximum strength, I feel I should brace it up. So that's what I'm doing there. I just heated my handle and bent as far as I could, and I'm just kind of working it around the shape of my piece, and that way I can tag this piece at 12 mil or 8 mil or whatever that is. And there I'm just making that connection. And since I used a piece of tubing as my handle, that's why I'm welding it to the outside of there. That's not really that important, but I just didn't want to close up that tube and have it pop or vacuum in on me. So I just am welding it to the outside so that tube doesn't actually seal up. But again, that's not too important. Here I'm just focusing with my hand torch right on that piece of 8 mil. I'm really trying not to hit my handle, obviously. At this point, I was actually kind of wishing I used a little bigger of a handle, 14 or 16 mil would have been nice. But as long as you focus your heat and really focus your backwash, or that, that heat that's going elsewhere after it hits your glass. I'm really focusing, even here, I'm focusing so that the angles I hit that glass, the backwash or that carryover heat doesn't just blast into my piece or hit something I don't want. So you are always careful of that with your hand torch. So there, I got my piece all braced up, and I'm just gonna toss it in the kiln, let it get nice and hot, and then go back into my weld, and I can really just shape it, however you want, however it needs to be to look right or to be, how you want it. So here I'm just kind of working each side, kind of working it in quarters, puffing them out. Had a little thick spot there. I wanted to, kind of flow down a little bit. So that's what I'm doing there. The more you get used to your mini torch, you can almost, I don't know, I almost view it like as my paintbrush. The way that you can flow glass around, you can move thick spots into the thin, like the way that you move it, you can kind of push the glass around. I almost find myself doing these brush stroke motions sometimes, but I don't know, it works. It's an amazing tool. So there I'm just, again, just getting it to look how I wanted it to look. So sometimes you need to brace something up in order to get the angle, in order to flow the glass where you need it to flow. And there I'm just going to toss it back in there. And here I'm just going to remove my brace, just heating that up, ripping that chunk out. And I am going to keep a couple inches hanging off my handle up there, just so I can brace to it later. And I'm just giving the bottom of my beaker a little bit of Bunsen love, just to be extra sure that it's going to be happy when I go into it here to remove my handle. And here you want to be careful to, just heat up that clear nub. I'm not trying to distort that pattern at all. And I'm also not trying to leave a bunch of clear on there, because if that does melt in, that will distort the pattern. So it's being careful of getting as much of that clear as you can without pulling up any of the color and without leaving a lump or a bump or whatever. So there I'm just putting a good amount of heat, kind of like the final amount of heat, into the bottom of this beaker can section here. I like to concave that wig pattern a little bit. It magnifies with water in it really well. I just think it looks cool, as well as gives you a nice rim that actually makes contact with the surface. And so there I need to flatten it, so I actually used my smasher to flatten it, and then just check the straightness on my Marva pad, and put a final heat into it. Anytime that you touch your glass onto graphite, it's sucking the heat out, basically stressing out your glass. So whenever I flatten something or really give something a hard marver, you definitely want to put a little bit of heat into it at the end and make sure everything's happy. And so here I'm just starting the female piece. This female is going to be made out of 2 ram's head sections, or I've heard it ram's head, maybe ram's horn. I don't know. It's just a straight section with a spiral termination on each end. And so I'm going to make those and weld them together and make the female out of that. So there I'm just again using my mini, getting my hole right in that middle gray stick. With a mini torch, you can be really precise with where you pop your hole. I can pop it in whatever color rod I want. Out of the 29 color rods in there, you can actually pop the hole in whatever one you choose, as long as you're careful. So there, I'm just picking off that termination off the first ball, getting it puffed out. And it's called a ram's head or horn, because when that ball is disked out, it's kind of what it looks like. You got the 2 horns to each side spiraling around. But they look nice and flowy. It's almost like a wave pattern. And I'm just going to put a little bit of heat into that, get it a little more round, a little more even, a little more easy to work with. And just popping my hole in the middle of the purple section. And then just getting both lips hot, and I attach them with the terminations kind of opposing each other. No reason. Personal preference. And I'm just going to puff these out, put some heat into them, bring them together into one section, and use that for my female. The female I'm going to make is pretty much the most basic, bare bones female that you can do. You don't really need any special tools. I'm just going to do it the most basic way that I first learned. And it is important what size, with the females, it's a pretty precise thing, so it does take a bit of practice, a bit of figuring out, a bit of screwing them up. They can be a little frustrating, your sizes have to be right on. But this one, it's a 14 mil, so I was shooting for about a 20 mil tube here. I'm trying to get it a decent thickness, probably about a 3 to 4, probably about a 3.5 mil tube. So here, instead of adding a section of peacock tubing on, I just drew on a couple coils of a stringer, about a 2 mil stringer of peacock, and that will serve as a nice thick lip wrap on there. So here, again, just using my marver pad and my paddle to kind of thicken that up, get it to that good 3 to 4 mil. You want to use your reamer to get it close to the general shape. You don't want it quite to that 14 mil taper yet, but I use a reamer to get it close. You can find a reamer, there's lots of reamers that are made now to that same taper. That's kind of the best reamer that you can use right there in the end, is an actual glass joint. As long as you get it hot, roll it in beeswax, it will not stick. You have to be quick. It takes a little practice, but it's all about getting it really close and then giving it that final perfect one, Boom, right there. It takes a minute to figure out. You have to be. Oh no, that wasn't the final one. There. Nope, not yet. So there it was right there. That was the one, I think, where you feel it go in, you lock it in, and you pull out perfectly straight. You don't twist or pull it, and you can get a pretty nice female. Now, to actually make that a ground joint, not just a joint, you can get some valve grinding compound. You can get this at any, Shucks, Auto Parts, any sort of auto store usually has it. Sometimes you can find it in a powder and find it in different grits. It all works. It's basically just an abrasive. And you can cover a joint with it, stick it in there, and grind away. And you can actually hand grind your joints. There, I'm just getting it cleaned out. That stuff is kind of greasy, so you want to make sure you get all of it off before you heat it up, obviously. just checking it out, making sure it's the right size, and it's good to go. So there, I heated it up. Didn't show you heating it up. I'm not just going into it cold right there. It was hot. So there, I'm just ripping off my handle, and I'm gonna get it to the right size and the correct angle to be welded onto the side of my beaker can. So to do that, I'll get it flared open, and then I'll heat up just half of the tube. As you can see I'm doing there, and just grab it and pull and just swipe off a big section on just half of my tube, roughly at a 45-degree angle. And then it's just a few strategic swipes. It'll give me a much better angle to weld that on it. You can see here I'm just swiping away, just little bits of heat, little motions, just removing glass, getting it to the right angle. And they're looking about good. I'm focusing on where that's going to put my downstem, focusing on, how much glass I have where. Heat up both, make that initial tag, and then I can go back and use that brace off of my handle up top to brace this too, and then I know I'm good to go. It's kind of a jumping back and forth, because you want to put some heat into the brace, and then you want to put some heat into your female and keep that nice and happy. And then I'll jump back, hit my brace, make sure that's all good, and then go back, put a little more heat until both welds are fully done. Then you can solely focus on that female weld. And here with that braced up, I'm fully confident I can move all around the female. It's not going to go anywhere. I can really just work that weld and make sure that it's super strong and super nice. And so there, I'm just hitting that top. It's the most acute angle, I guess you'd say, on this weld. It's where glass wants to bunch up on you. It's really where that swiping comes in handy. There it is, looking pretty good, pretty clean. So there is the tube in one piece. It's looking like a bong. And while it's braced up, I'm just taking advantage of the fact that it is braced and just puffing out that weld on the back a little more, just kind of making the weld a little wider, I guess. Another really nice thing, or another main benefit of bracing that up in the first place, was just for the integrity of the piece, for the overall strength of the piece. If it's braced up well, I know that there's no stress in that weld. It hasn't been stressed out in any way. The piece is basically relaxing while that is being done. So there, I'm just pulling out that leaf from before, checking out how it looks, and stay tuned for next time where we're going to start dressing this thing up. Thanks a lot for watching.